Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Q&A with Pat Longo. I'm so excited to have Pat here today to talk about her journey being with her abilities and being highly intuitive and empathic, and talk about her book, which I don't have a copy of it in front of me.
Well, I do.
Yay! The Gifts Beneath Your Anxiety, Simple Spiritual Tools to Find Peace, Awaken the Power Within, and Heal Your Life. And this book, I have to say, Pat, I've bought so many copies and given them to people as gifts. I've recommended it and referred people to pick up the book. And I've only heard just glowing remarks about the information that's in it and how it's helped them, especially when I hear about people talking about they've been experiencing anxiety. And so
Thank you, Ellen. And I have found a lot of people are constantly buying it for other people, which, you think of people, maybe it's not you, but there's so many people out there that suffer from anxiety, and it really, really, really is connected to spiritual gifts and intuition.
Absolutely.
And the empath, most of all. Okay. Everyone has spiritual gifts. There's nobody without them. If you're not let's see, if I can remember them all, a narcissist, a sociopath, or a psychopath, then you're an empath. So this is a good thing, but there's all different degrees. There's all different degrees of it. And it just depends on where you are on your evolutionary soul evolvement. And that's how it, I feel like we all got our learning and our knowledge in past lives. It's just being enhanced here. It's all from the past. So the more we get, the more times we've been around the block, the more information that we get each time we come in, the stronger our gifts are. So the children that are going through this, I'm going to tell you about my beginning, but I just want to mention that with them, when you got to keep your eye out for puberty. I don't know how old your children are. Anybody want to volunteer? Tara, how old is yours? Boy, girl, what?
I have two. One's 9, a girl's 9, and then my boy's 12.
Okay, so she's on her way and he's already there.
Yeah.
Kim, what about you?
I have a son and he is 13.
Okay.
And he recently commented, we're all in the middle school and going through puberty. It's just a terrible, awkward time in our lives.
Oh, well, that's very astute of him. Well, again, it has a lot to do with spirituality now. And how about you, Rebecca?
I have an 18 and a 22-year-old, and my 18-year-old is a senior in high school, and we at my spiritual community here local in Atlanta, we are all recognizing how our kids who are in high school and middle school are really, like, they're deeply struggling right now. And we've been just started sending healing energy to the whole school, to the, administrators and teachers in the school, because they're the ones that,
It's tough out there.
yeah, guiding. So anyway, yes, yeah,
You've passed the puberty stage with your kids, although even 18, high school is a tough one, and then it gets really tough in college as well. But we'll get into that, and maybe hopefully more people will come on, and I'll be talking about that at that time. But Ellen had asked me how this all started for me. And, I always felt I was different as a kid. I was quiet. I came one of 6. I'm up at the top of the line, and I like to be by myself. I like to be out in nature. We had a nursery that was behind my parents' home, but it had grown. It was about a quarter of our backyard was part of this nursery before they separated the properties. And I just wanted to be out there all the time. I just wanted to wander around by myself inside all these giant trees and bushes and fun stuff. And my mother said I used to stack books a lot. And I love black and white movies. I just was by myself a lot. And I enjoyed that. I don't know why. I mean, I was tough. I was a tomboy. I had friends. I was out there spying on the girls with all the boys in the neighborhood. And but I always felt like an observer. And that continues today. And I'm 73 now. And I am always observing. I'm constantly watching everybody. Since these gifts came, I tended to step back a little bit and just start paying attention. And when I began to teach, I started paying attention to all my students and observing the behavior and how their gifts came forward. And then I would discuss their childhood. And I do that with all my clients. And I find out all this information, and I was able to put it all together like a program for all children. Listen, I get them very young. You know, I've got them even at 2 years old that know their past lives, or a 7-year-old that's a healer and can touch people, and other little children that know when their mother is pregnant. And it's just amazing. And I do believe that since 2012, I feel like that's a marker for me, that all children being born are wide open. Okay, it doesn't mean there weren't many before that, but all children being born now, it's almost like everything is switched and they are wide open, and they're getting all the letters, you know, the ADDs, ADHD, OCD, ODD, Tourette's. There's a PDD or a PPD. I'm not even sure what it is. There's so many letters, but they're just very special, sensitive kids, and the kids on the spectrum. And now they've even kind of moved that out of the way. It used to be, they had a different name for it. Now everybody's on the spectrum. So I just look at those kids that they are so sensitive that everything's like nails on a chalkboard to them. And that's tough. There are different ways to handle that. And I'm sure, Ellen, some of the people the moms that you have met, the families that you have met, a lot of the kids are on the spectrum or in full blown. And so I'll have some tips and hints for that as we go along. But going back to me, I was always interested in psychics. I was interested in mysteries first. I read books when I was a child. I read and most of you wouldn't probably know Nancy Drew, but I read every Nancy Drew mystery. Every night I read another book. I was stacking them up. And when I was done with Nancy Drew, I went to the Bobbsey twins, which was another a couple of kids that were constantly detectiving and solving things. So I feel like if I wasn't doing what I was doing now, that I would probably be a detective, because my job is to put pieces of puzzles together, and I love to do it. And I think that's why I observe so much. So I became a mother very young, and I had 5 children before I was 25. So needless to say, I was very busy. So spirituality was not even a thought in my head. You know, it was more like fixing hair, cooking dinner, making lunches, and so on and so forth, and keeping everybody together. Now, about 25, I went to my first psychic reading, and my sister dragged me along, and I found it fascinating. Now, you know, after that, it was every year. I would just go to a local fair. And my daughter at that point was 18 pretty soon, and I was dragging her along, and we'd each pick 2 people. And who knew I was studying? I didn't even know that I was studying. I was observing and I was watching, and we'd compare notes when we were done. And, you know, we know there was only a few. There really were only a few people that I felt were really good and legitimate and people with integrity that were out there at that time. Again, that's 50 years ago, almost. So by about, I was in my 30s, but all the way through, I was hypersensitive, allergic to so many things. I had allergies to foods. I had allergies to, you know, the typical hay fever. I had eczema at 7, and pay attention to this because these special kids, a lot of them have all these allergies and all these things. I had psoriatic arthritis when I got diagnosed with that when I was older, but my grandson has RA already, and he's ticking, and my other granddaughter sees 3-dimensional spirit. She sees everybody and everything they're wearing, and just like we're looking at each other now, that's what she sees, and it doesn't bother her because we fixed it. I gave her boundaries and her tools, and I have multiple nephews, grandnephews nieces that are all highly gifted. And I'm sure they probably all are, but they're not all open to my page yet. And if and when that happens, you know, they all know what I do. And slowly but surely they filter in. But there are healers out there. There are psychics, there are mediums, there are numerologists, astrologists, everybody that is, or maybe the environmentalists. Got to remember that with the kids too, because the kids that are being born, they're so, some of them are so geared toward the environment and what's right and what we're doing wrong. Those that want to make a change. So you're all in a position to have children that make huge changes in this world. God willing, I'm going to knock on wood for that. But my one granddaughter that sees everything, she's going to become a doctor. So I think she might make a very interesting doctor with the gifts that she has. So we'll see. I'll keep you posted down the line. She's just 17 and she's interviewing now. She's been accepted in so many schools already, but some of them are top medical schools. So we'll see. We'll see where that goes. All right. So you can see I jump a lot. I'm going to jump a lot. That's what I do. When a thought comes in my head, I go there and then I always come back to where I started or where I left off. So as time went by, I was probably about 36-ish. My mom was diagnosed with inoperable breast and bone cancer. And I was already on the positive page. Everything happens for a reason, you know, be positive, don't think the worst. And, you know, we were given pretty much a death sentence for her. It had already metastasized to several places. So I think she walked around with it for over 5 years without telling anybody, without going to a doctor. She knew, but she didn't say a word. She kept washing everything with holy water, and that's wonderful, but it wasn't going to fix this one. So I took my mother to a healer that a psychic told me about. And when I walked in the door of this psychic, he looked at me and, you know, he told me that I was worried about a woman above me. And he began to tell me all about where she had the cancer, where it had metastasized. He was right on it. And then he said, I think she has some pinpricks in the liver that they didn't pick up. And he handed me a card for a healer. Now, I wasn't doing any of this yet. And he handed me a card. And I remember it said the breath of life. That's what she had on it. And her name was Anne. And I called her right up and I loved her. You know, it's the first time I dealt with anything like this, but I really loved her energy. And I asked my mother if she trusted me. I made an appointment. I took her for a 2-hour drive. And after the healing, I wasn't there for it. She put Oprah on for me to watch. And my mother went into remission and she went in for, it was 15 years. She passed, she was 69 when all this started. She was 84 when she passed. And it was an absolutely true miracle. She was not, chemotherapy didn't work for my mother. Her counts would drop dramatically. And they did put her on tamoxifen, which she loved in the beginning. She was very happy about that, but I do know where it came from and how it happened. So she became the light of the oncologist life because every time she came in, she was never sick. She went to all her appointments, did her scans, and everything just froze in place, So that's how I got into this, because my curiosity of what was this? What just happened? How did this happen? And I started seeking. And I didn't have to seek very long. My son found a newspaper, a local paper, and I was pulling out of the driveway. And what teenager runs outside with the local paper and hands it to you as you're backing out of the driveway and say, I thought you might be interested in this, Mom. And it was a spiritual group of some kind. It had to do with seeing James Van Praagh, a well-known medium, out on the island. And so I called the number. And the woman that I spoke to, I guess she was intuitive. And she said, you know, I know this woman. Her name is Holly. And she said, I know this woman. And I think you might want to talk to her. She's a teacher of spirituality. So I called her. She didn't read me, like gave me a reading. She basically just knew that I was on this path, and she invited me to her class. So this is where it all gets interesting, because it was a 10-week class and each week was different. It was just about anything you couldn't understand. So one week it might be tarot cards. Another week it would be angels. Another week it would be UFOs, dowsing rods, crystals, pendulums. It didn't matter. But the third week that I was in there, my hands started to burn on fire. They were so hot, and I didn't know it was connected to the class. It was going on at home. I could not cool them down. And when I went back the following week, it was a rainy Monday morning. And as I'm sitting there was a woman in my peripheral vision sitting on a folding chair. And I'm facing the teacher, and she was over to my side. And she kept twisting and turning and crossing and recrossing. She looked very uncomfortable, but it was distracting. So the teacher asked me to move over on the couch, and could I make room for her? And she came and sat down. And Holly said to me, Pat, put your hand on her leg. I looked at her, are you crazy? I didn't say that, but my eyes told her, you're out of your mind. And then she said, no, put your hand on her thigh. I said, okay. And I put my hand there. I did nothing. I didn't know I was supposed to do anything. I just put my hand there like a good little student. And 2 minutes later, she had no pain. And so my journey began, and it began, I'll say it was full speed ahead, but I was spinning when I left there. So I had no idea what happened. And I was, why me? You know, why would God pick me? Because I knew right away it wasn't me, that I had help, and big help, whoever was doing it. And, you know, my ego got in the way right away, because I thought, oh, God gave me this gift. I'm going to heal the world. And then I tamped that down pretty quickly, and I began to, you know, my life just changed. It changed on a dime, and people were calling me, and I was being pulled here and pulled there, and I had to quit my job. I think 1997, I quit my job because it was a part-time job, but I was all over the tri-state area. People were calling me, and I was going to sick people. And now listen, there was nobody that told me what to do. I had to figure it out myself. My teacher was not a healer, and there were no other healers in the class. And I was left out there floundering. So I kind of came up with different methods, and they've changed over the years. You know, I'm doing it for 30 years, probably, just about. And it started out, I would spend like a half an hour just with my hands on people, and I would feel heat. I would feel heat in your body. So if I touched your back, and, you know, if you said you had pain in your leg, but I felt it in your back, that's where I would stay. Wherever the heat was, it was like an indicator for me. And over time, I don't really touch people anymore. I do it very differently. Very rarely do I touch. I would say I touch when it's a spine, and I have to put somebody on a table, or if it's a child and I'm working, you know, maybe with brain cancer, or, you know, I'll do certain things like that. But it has evolved to a point where I went from a half an hour to 15 minutes to 6, because I'm not doing it. It's coming through me. And the one thing you all have to recognize with your children and the gifts that they have, that this is all coming from another space, another place, another entity. And your intuition, as I said earlier, we're all intuitive. Everybody's got intuition, but it's being channeled in, and everything is channeled by thought. It's all channeled by thought. We manifest by thought. And I don't know, Ellen, do you guys ever talk about manifesting? You know,
We haven't covered that topic yet.
yeah, and I won't go too far into it, but it's thoughts become things. Thoughts become things. So whether they're good thoughts, bad thoughts, or indifferent thoughts. So, and also words in every language carry a vibration. And you want to keep your words at a high vibration, because lower vibrations are just not going to work well for you. You have to stay in a certain vibration. I tell people all the time, when people come to me and they have problems, I tell them that they're in the emotional basement. And I need them to be on the ceiling. So you got to be up here. And in order to do that, there's many things that you have to do to raise your vibration. So you've got these kids and they're going through puberty and they're in school and there's all kinds of crazy stuff going on. And, it is a time that a lot of children go towards drugs and alcohol. Now, when my kids were younger, when I was younger, it was pot. It's not pot anymore. That's just one little thing over here, and now it's being legalized. That would probably have been a better choice than the things that are out there today that are open and easy to gain for these children. And all you need is a kid that's confused, that feels like they don't fit in, that strong empath that's feeling everybody's energy in the school, and they don't know what else to do. So they do whatever it takes to try to fit in, or maybe to try to dumb themselves down, or stop feeling numb, so they think. And they all go to these unfortunate situations. And some, unfortunately, there's depression, there's anxiety, there's panic attacks, there's suicide attempts, and suicide happens all the time. Now, this is not, it's kind of off topic, but on topic. I was on the phone earlier. I don't watch the news. I haven't watched it in probably over 20 years. And, I don't know much. People magazine comes once a week. I see what I have to see, or somebody tells me what's going on. And a 14-year-old just committed suicide that was bullied and beat up in school. And she was out of school because of the beating. Nobody did anything about it. And, kids are different. They're picked on. And I don't know your children. The only one I know is Ethan, but I certainly know when you're different, and maybe you're a little too smart, or maybe a little too intuitive, or maybe you're picked on. And the bullies are out there and they're not being handled, because most often bullies are bullied. So you have to be very in tune to your children. And I work, again, going back to Rebecca, just because I have many, many college students that get in touch with me. One of my grandnieces is one of them right now. And she also sees like my granddaughter does, and has been seeing since she's very young. So when she went to go off to college, this is her first year, panic attacks beyond panic attacks beyond panic attacks. And I had a young student that went to college, and she was home in 1 week, and now she's a full-time reading medium at 21, because she couldn't handle the feeling of all that energy there. And what happens in college? Stress. There's stress with grades, and there's stress to be part of the in crowd. There's alcohol, all this stuff is presented, and they're kind of on their own. So when you have a strong empathic child, you've got to give them really good boundaries and protection. Okay, the protection is the most important. And I can get a kid and an adult out of anxiety in a heartbeat, with one simple tool. And, Ellen knows it. It's in the book, Surround, Ground, Shield. But of course, I have to explain all that to you, and I will, because you're all going to need it. And hopefully your children are open to listening, because again, they're at a point where they don't necessarily want to hear you. We all fell off turnip trucks. In case you don't know that, every parent fell off a turnip truck. They know absolutely nothing. So again, having 5, my kids are in their 50s. So they're dealing with their kids now. And so I get all those stories. So that's added. I had 5, I now have 17 grandchildren. So now I'm working with all 17 of them. And everybody's got a different story, and we've got lots of fluctuating personalities and intuitions, and they're all very empathic. I could see them when they're little. The children, for those of you that have young ones, the kids that can't sleep in their own bed, they're afraid of the dark, they have to be with mommy and daddy, the door has to be open, all the things that go bump in the night. Some of them have invisible friends or imaginary friends, invisible playmates. All of this has begun from the moment they open their little eyes. And it just begins to slowly come into fruition. I had one of my grandchildren at 6 months, and I tell this to people with infants. And some of you someday will be grandparents, but the infants that are, let's just say, constantly crying, they actually need to be, the swaddles help, especially these little suits they have now that you think they were in a straitjacket, they actually work to keep them covered. But it's keeping that solar plexus covered. So if a parent takes a child out into a group, a baby, and all the baby does is cry, and then when they bring them home, they're fine. Before they go out again, I've told them you need to take something, some type of binding. I should have created it. I had a plan a long time ago. I had somebody that was starting to make it, but I never got that far. But to go around the solar plexus and completely keep it covered. Now, this brings me to what I call the hugging vest. There might be another name for it. It's like a weighted vest for children with autism. Or, and kids do feel really good, empathic children feel really good with weighted vests. Or the thunder vest for pets. Now, I didn't know anything about either one of those when I invented my vest. Okay. And then slowly but surely I found out about the hugging vest. And I said, wow, whoever created this vest, I don't think they realized they were creating it for an empath. I think they felt the children who didn't like to be touched, this would make them feel safe and comfortable. But it really is covering their solar plexus, which is where it has to be covered. And if you notice your kids, the body language of those of them that tend to fold their arms a lot, cross their arms, you can test the theory out. If the kids are at home and they're a little jumpy, have them put a pillow in front of them, like a little couch pillow, and you'll see them calm down within 5 minutes. It completely changes things when the solar plexus is covered. Women, we carry pocketbooks, and we have some of them, we have them over our shoulder and we pull them in front of us, especially when we're out on a city street or, me, I'm very little. So in the food store, my pocketbook's in the basket and I'm completely covered. It's probably up to here. The basket's bigger than I am, but it's very important to have that part of their body secure. So when I give you the tool that you're going to use with them, it is an imaginary tool. And then I go back to what I said originally, and we have somebody popped in, Pete. Hi, Pete. It is thoughts become things. So everything comes back to thought, everything you do. And fear, your worst enemy. You don't even want to go there, but it's part of life. All right. It's part of our society today, what's going on in the world politically and racially, and you name it. There's a lot of fear out there. So that's a collective consciousness that comes together. And when these kids, again, your children are not the only ones in their schools that are like this. God knows how many there are. You are all just in a collective group right now, and you're lucky to be a part of it. But there's so many. So tell your children they should put their thoughts out and ask for children of like minds in school, children similar to them. And they'll somehow, some way find them if they begin to put the thoughts out. And that it doesn't matter what age they are, what grade they are, if they're struggling, if they can't find their group, ask them to put it out. And they just kind of come in like moths to a flame, and they don't feel so alone that they're the only ones that are going through these intuitive thoughts and feelings. Now, all right, let's see, where do I want to go? I'm gonna go to the surround ground shield, which is what I call it. It's something you all should do, because actually I'm going to do it with you, and I'll do it for those that get to see this later on. I'm going to do it with you because you must do it first with your child in order for them to do the shortcut. Okay. And the shortcut is surround ground shield. But if they don't know what that means, it's not going to happen. You have to actually do it once. So let's all pretend right now. Close your eyes. We're going to do it together. And just use your imaginations and imagine yourself being surrounded in a magnificent bubble. a beautiful bubble, translucent bubble, filled with God's white light and protection. Now, you don't have to see it. You don't even have to feel it. You just have to think it, because thoughts become things. Now I want you to imagine that you have 3 cords attached to you, one from the bottom of each foot and one from your tailbone. And imagine yourself sending those cords right through the chair, through the bubble, the floor and any floor below you, all the way down into the very center of Mother Earth. And imagine those cords becoming roots and locking you in tight like the roots of a big old tree. So for 2 seconds, you are a tree. You are sturdy, yet flexible, and completely locked into the earth, grounded tight. And the last part of the exercise, I want you to imagine putting on a very shiny metal vest of armor. No collar, no sleeves. It's not heavy or cumbersome. It fits you perfectly. It was made for you. It covers your heart and your lungs. It covers your solar plexus, right in the soft spot by your sternum. And it covers your abdomen. So front and back, shoulders through waist, you are completely protected by this very shiny metal vest of armor. It may be much like a gladiator wears or possibly an archangel, but trust that it is there. And I want you to open your eyes. I'm going to explain each piece. The bubble is a force field, and every day that you use it, it gets thicker and stronger. It connects you to God and spirit, and it keeps negativity at bay. The grounding is your balance, and each and every one of us must be connected to the earth, because when you are not in balance, you're in your thoughts and you're in your emotions. And we have to be connected to both. It's just an intention. It's an intention. That thought creates reality. And the last piece, the vest, is what stops the anxiety. So the vest will stop the anxiety, but it has a filter that keeps all the toxins that every one of you and your children have been absorbing since you opened your eyes as an infant. We absorb environmental toxins and other people's toxins. So these kids, again, when they're in school, think about it. You know, when they're in elementary school, it's one thing, because in elementary school, it's just the neighborhood. And you know more people, you're more familiar. There might be sports and dancing and, you know, art classes and things, and they know each other more. But when they hit middle school, all bets are off, because all different schools are merging in, and now they're dealing with all kinds of different energies that they weren't familiar with. So their safety has been shot, and now they need more protection. So this, when you can do this with them and understand that, let me finish just one more piece with the vest. When these kids also get digestive issues, they get autoimmune diseases, they get allergens and high sensitivities to many different things: sound, lighting, smells, medicines, foods. There's a whole gamut of sensitivity that they can get, and they're very, very heightened. So what this vest does is it stops that from coming in, and those that you've picked up from years before begin to dissipate. So the vest has a twofold purpose. It's got a threefold, actually. It's a shiny metal vest for a reason. I made it shiny. What happens when light hits a reflection like that, hits metal or a mirror? It reflects out. So when you put on your imaginary vest that is really real, it actually reflects negative energy back out, but it also reflects white light out. So it has multiple purposes. I originally did the imaginary WWE belt. That's where I started, because I had a 9-year-old that was very empathic, and I'm talking to his mom, not him. We're on Zoom, or at that time it was Skype. And she said to me, oh, he's coming in the room. Why don't you talk to him? And I'm like, oh, Lord, I can't explain chakras to this kid and all this stuff. So immediately I said to my guides, give me something. And boom, I saw that belt in the air with one of the wrestlers. And I said, well, that's it, the imaginary WWE belt. And it worked for years. That's what my granddaughter uses. She doesn't even use the vest because she's been using it since she's 8.5. The day that I found out she had anxiety was at a bridal shower. She walked in and I could see panic all over her face. And I had no idea because I would see her with her family or in my home. So she was always in a safety zone. And to see her come in like that, I said, I'm her grandmother. How did I not know this child was suffering like this? And I walked up to her, pulled her off her mother's thigh, and I took her back to the front door. And I asked her, do you get nervous or uncomfortable when you're with people that you don't know? And her eyes got big and she nodded her head. And I said, okay, close your eyes. She has 2 older brothers and they always were watching wrestling. And I took my 2 fingers and I poked her right in the solar plexus. And I said, I want you to imagine, I said, you know those wrestlers that your brothers watch on television? She said, yeah. Did you know when they hold it up in the air and, they're this macho, they got this big belt with a gold buckle? And she said, yes. And I said, well, I want you to put it on right now. In your thoughts, you're going to put this on right now. That was the end of her anxiety. It stopped that day. And every day she puts on her, and I called her like 2 days later, said, how you doing? And she said, good. And she was 8.5. She walked to school. She wasn't on the bus. She went around the block. And I said, are you putting on your belt? And she said, every day, right before I walk into school. Had she been on a bus, I would have had to put it on, prior to the bus. Now I like people to put it on when they wake up because everybody's texting today. And the second you go into a text, you're in somebody's energy field. The second you're in it, you're in their drama or their story or whatever. You don't want to do that. So it's better to get it done quickly. I have a lot of moms doing it with the kids right before they leave the house to go to school. They all do it together, and again, if the mom knows what they're doing or the dad, and you put them through it once, then all they have to say is surround ground shield, just like that, very quickly. So for my granddaughter, she didn't start seeing things till she started at 9.5. She didn't want to go to parties. And I recognized that she was actually feeling the loved ones of those that had passed. And her best friend's father had passed. And so I didn't know this either. And her mom called me up and said, they call me Grandma La. Grandma La, Riley won't go to this party. And she's making up all these stories and it's her best friend. And I said, I talked to her and I gave her the bubble now. I moved her to the bubble and the grounding. I did that. She made it to the party, but she was home in 3.5 hours. And then I found out that the next day that the little girl's father had passed. I said, okay. Because she said, Grandma, every time I walk towards the house, I start to feel funny in my stomach. And my students, that used to happen to, they would drive into my neighborhood, and the closer they would get to the class, because we had lots of spirit in class, the closer they would get to class, all of a sudden their heads would start, they'd get headaches, or they'd start getting foggy, or their stomach would start to hurt, or their heart would start to pound, because they were going to walk into a room with 20 other people, very spiritually gifted people. And it's a lot of energy. It's a lot of energy. And so for her, she was 10 and she was lucky that it was my husband that she saw first. And I was right there. So she grabbed me by the arm. I'm having a birthday party and I've got like 20 some odd people now. She grabbed me by the arm and dragged me in the bathroom. I said, what's the matter? And she said, I just saw Papa. I said, you did? How lucky for you. And we just brought it right down. And she explained how she saw him, what he was wearing. She said, I screamed, but nobody heard me. And he disappeared, but she gave me his full description right down to his Ugg slippers. And this, again, I was there and she had me to ask her questions, or to ask me questions. And so she said to me, can I do this with anybody I want? I said, thought she was very brave. And I said, I don't see why not. She had lost her one of her other grandparents. So I think that's what she was thinking about. And then she said, well, how do I talk to them? And I said, through your thoughts, just like you're talking to me. And she said, well, what do I say? I said, anything. How are you? What are you doing there? Who are you with? Do you have a message? It's very simple, very easy. I made very light of it. I was decorating a cake. My back was to her. I didn't give her any attention on this because I don't like to hype it up. You don't want to do that either. And or make too big of a deal. So then she said, I think I want to try it again. I said, you do? She goes, I want to try it now. So mind you, this is a 10-year-old girl and she wants to try it again. So, okay. I'm sure she felt safer because I was there. I wasn't going up with her. She said, I don't want to do it in the bathroom now. She said, I said, well, you can go upstairs. And I said, you can go in Papa's man cave. And so up she went. 20 minutes later, she was back. She grabbed me by the arm, dragged me to the stairwell. And I said, how did it go? And she said, it worked. And I said, who did you ask for? She said, Papa. She said, but he stayed in the doorway. You know, he didn't come in. It was a big room. He stayed over there and he didn't come in. And she said, I talked to him and I saw his mouth move, but all I could hear were these fuzzy sounds in my ears. And the kids, believe me, they get a lot of sounds in their ears. They get high-pitched sounds, ringing in the ears, mumbled chatter. Sometimes when they're in bed, that sounds like there's a party going on in the next room and they weren't invited. Some hear high laughter. Listen, there are some that get darker, negative things that might hear growling. I've had more things that I've gotten pulled into that I have to do something about or teach somebody about. So, you know, the keeping a high vibration that I discussed before is so important for these kids. But you know, they're going to go through things because they have to. It's part of their journey too. It's part of their development and growth. And having you all in tune with this and educated about it, it's just going to make it that much easier for them as they go through it, because you will have the answers. You know, Ellen does what she does and she's amazing. And you guys are all in this group. And you know, I only know a little bit of it so far, but it should spread and spread and spread. And I used to tell my students, don't keep this to yourself. Spread it. There's people don't, and listen, I started a long time ago, so it wasn't as talked about. And everybody, they would call me their, you know, they were going to a meditation class. They would tell their families. Nobody wanted to talk about what they were actually doing. But now it's so much more widespread and open. And there are so many more children that are suffering, and which I cannot tolerate.
Yeah.
So, you know, the kids are the ones that I jump on first. I get appointments all the time with adults that are going through this. I have people in their 80s that are just finding me now that have had anxiety their whole life, and people that have agoraphobia, and people that can't drive on a highway. And you know, and I joke with one of, well, she didn't know I was joking, but I was. She said she wanted me to teach her to open up her gifts, and she was 82. I'm like, who are you going to talk to? The people in the nursing home, you know? And but it's the truth. People that don't know about people like us don't know where to go. They don't know where to go, and they have nobody to help them. And I tell them it's never too late. You know, I get, you know, kids in 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s on a weekly basis of people that have been suffering with this. And the minute we start talking about it, I ask them certain questions, things that I've been telling you, and right away, yep, that happened. Yep, that happened to me. That happened to me. And they're like, they cry because they're so happy that somebody actually knows they're not crazy. You know, so it's so important to start them little. It should be in the schools. It really should be taught in the schools. It should, at least to eliminate anxiety and to learn what an empath is, how sensitive they are to other people's emotions. You know, I didn't pick up emotions right away. I picked up pain. I picked up people's physical pain. So please know that any one of your children going through this is susceptible to picking up pain, and they might think they're sick. I was sick constantly. 5 siblings, and I'd go to the doctor, and my father thought I was a hypochondriac because there was never anything wrong with me. I said, but Daddy, I can't swallow. You know, I was picking everything up from everybody, but it was pain and illness And now I know as a healer that this was part of my training. It was part of my training. I had to go through all of that in order to help diagnose situations. I was blessed with all these children and grandchildren and siblings and in-laws. My husband came from 7, I came from 6. So I've got family beyond family. And if you could see on my cell phone how many body parts I'm shown on a weekly basis, and I half the time I don't know what I'm looking at. I'm like, what is but they're constantly sending me rashes and open sores and cuts and teeth, and I'm always looking at something because they come to me first. My granddaughter is a different granddaughter. My oldest granddaughter was a softball player, and when she was little, and a soccer player, I think it was soccer first before softball. But if she got injured, she didn't know what I did. This isn't something we talked about, but she would beg her parents, don't take me to the hospital, take me to grandma. She knew intuitively that I would be able to do something to help her to fix her. So again, be very aware of the child who might be feeling other people's pain. The vest should cover that. But I also use a tool where I would take 2 hands and put it, and I'll dip down a little bit right over the solar plexus, and take 2 hands like that and simply say, be gone, you are not of me. And I do that 3 times. And if it was still there, it was mine. It'll go away if it belongs to somebody else. If I acknowledge, I'd be in a room full of students, and all of a sudden I would feel maybe terrible shoulder pain. So if let's say not students, let's say people that didn't know anything about what we're doing. And if I would say, wow, I have such a pain in my shoulder, somebody in that group of people is going to tell me they have a rotator cuff issue, or they injured their shoulder in an accident and they're going to physical therapy. And as soon as I acknowledge it, it leaves me instantly. If it was in my class, it would usually happen when we were holding hands, because I was always fully protected. But at the end of the class, we would do a healing circle and we would link hands, and we would fill the center of the circle with pink light for love and green light for healing. And we would just send it in by thought. And then we'd go around the room and add groups that needed healing, or family members that needed healing. It might be the military or the politicians or our family. But we always started with ourselves first, because you guys are the most important. Everybody, it's like the airplane, you got to put the mask on you before you help the kid. You all have to be protected. This is just as important for you as it is for your children. But there are ways to eliminate the pain. So if I picked up pain in a group like that, one day I picked it up in my right hip, and I'm doing the meditation, so I can't stop or drop anybody's hands. So by the time I'm finished, I'm like, okay, who's got the hip pain? And 3 hands went up, and I'm like, oh, and it was gone from me instantly. So again, just more things to pay attention to.
So
Go ahead.
Can
Go.
I just step in front? Because I love your stories. And I had a couple questions from people that you've answered through all that you've shared, which has been beautiful.
Throw them at me.
I got one I wanted to toss out because we're running close to our hour time. But I had a parent who couldn't be here who was mentioning, we touched a little bit before this started, but whose child is 11. So, in that puberty stage when their abilities are heightening up, but started developing tics and moves. They've been dealing with stress at school, but they're now having these tics and movements. And she just wanted to have that question asked on what to do about that when you're noticing that your child is he's never had anything like that before, but he is experiencing a lot of stress at school, and this has now come up.
Well, excuse me. It could be related to the spiritual gifts, but there are many other avenues for the ticking. All right, because I do have that with a couple of my grandchildren and with some of my children. Okay. And it has a lot to do with obsessive compulsive behavior. And it doesn't have to start when they're young. It can start later on, can pick up. It does start, I've seen it very young at 6 months. I've seen it at a year. I could tell you that a child had obsessive compulsive behaviors because they begin to tick, but it doesn't have to be that. It could also be from having strep throats. If a child has many strep throats, they get something called, I believe it's called pandas. And my one grandson did have it, and he began ticking. And he was probably around that age, and he's still got them much later in life. He's being, I would say it could be neurological, and I would have it checked out neurologically first, because there are some very gentle medications that can be used for ticking. And one of my granddaughters has Tourette's, and it started as ticking. And what people don't know is that a lot of people have a false thought about Tourette's. They think Tourette's is when people go around cursing and counting numbers and Rain Man kind of thing, but it's not like that. That's just one variation. If someone starts ticking and they start making sounds from their throat, that could be yawns, multiple yawns. It could be a clearing of the throat. It could be, there's a third thing. But it's technically sounds, a lot of sounds that they're making. That once it hits the throat, it becomes Tourette's. It has a different diagnosis, but it's still treated with, again, you would never know that my granddaughter had anything, but it was very difficult for her and it always happens when there's change. So when she was going into kindergarten, she couldn't stop blinking. She couldn't stop blinking. And she said to me, Grandma, I don't want to do it. She was 5 years old. I don't want to do it, but I can't stop it. And I would work with her with meditation and healing and but she really had to have something. She got something called inositol. And inositol is a vitamin, inositol. And it was put in her lemonade in the morning. And the therapist directed, he had a child with autism, and he told my daughter and her husband that to try this, and that worked beautifully. So that is one way of calming the nervous system. See, the nervous system sets the tics off, and the nervous system is when you're stressed, you're missing B's and C's. So inositol has a lot of B's. I don't know what else it has in it, but it works. So that's one thing. And of course, if you went to a neurologist and they diagnosed something, you might get a different one. As my granddaughter got older, she takes something called 10X. And it works, she's gone through stages of ticking, and they can go, they're phasal. So they can go for several months and then switch to something completely different, and then switch like that. Now she's, out of college, and there have been, I could list the different ones, but they never affected her socially. The blinking would have, but we got a handle on that quick. But that was going into kindergarten. The sounds in the throat started when she was going into middle school. When she went into high school, something else came in. So the stress of the change can also bring things on stronger.
Wow. Well,
She can get in touch with me. I mean, I could go on. There's so many things I could talk about with it, but it doesn't always have to be spiritual. If it's stress related, it could be bringing out the ticking behavior.
Good. I'm glad, because she'll be listening to this on the replay. And I just wanted to let you know, Pat, because you brought out so many good points. And we have people in this group from around the world, other countries. And so you've got, just like what you said, and that's been the point and the purpose of this whole thing, was to bring people together and let people know that it's children everywhere, people everywhere. So this group is about educating the parents, so that, just like you said, the more the parents are aware, and we have resources on our website for people to educate themselves, bringing in experts like you. So the more the parents are aware, that's what really helps the children. And then we also have some educators and counselors and folks who are part of this group that are also, trying to take in this information. So trying to start to push the word out and spread it out, like what
I think they're starting to do, they call it wellness meditation or mindfulness meditation. They're starting to do some things like that in school. It needs to be more. It's good, that quiets the mind, but they need to know that they have there are things to do to stop what they're feeling. I don't want to see teenage suicides and, kids in middle school going through this, and they can be even younger now, because puberty starts earlier, guys. And when I started this, it was, I think 11, 12, and 13. Now children are going into puberty at 8, 9, and 10. And it's all the fast foods and all the hormones and all the foods that everybody's been eating for all these years. And it can be problematic. But just so you know, Ellen, before you have to wrap it up, an hour is never enough for me.
Well, I was going to say that because I was going to ask everybody, because I know I wanted to open to see if anybody else had questions, but you always have so many wonderful stories and so much information and wisdom from your years of experience to share that I never get enough time of talking with you, Pat. But I wanted to ask is one, for the people who are here, are you good to stay for a few minutes? Does anybody have questions that you would like to ask Pat? We can, I want to be respectful of people's time. So thumbs up if we're good to stay for a little longer for questions. Or if you have to drop off, you can. But Kim, you have a question you'd like to ask?
Well, really, it's more of a comment. I did recently get your book, and I started reading it. And one day my son came home from school, and he was struggling with some stuff that day. And at the beginning of your book, you have this part that describes empaths, right? Each of the little statements that are written out there. And I read them to him. And by the end of my reading them to him, he recognized so much of himself in them that it helped him. He felt so much better. He was able to go to bed that night, without kind of carrying around what he had from his day. And it really, I think, helped. So I have to say absolutely that I very much appreciated being able to share that with him.
Absolutely.
He's an incredibly avid reader, right? And so, I was sharing it with him, and it really, really helped him to then identify, right, that a lot of the anxiety that he is an empath, and putting a label on something like that for him really helped. So I just wanted to make that comment, and thank you very much.
I am very happy. There are more traits. I tell adults on their homework, everybody gets homework from me, and I say there's 30 traits of an empath. And if you look at those, I picked out 18 that I feel are the most prevalent with this spiritual group. But there are 30, and a lot of people call me and say I was all 30, I was 28, I was 24. Those they recognize it, and it's half the battle is understanding that you're not alone, that there really is something that happens like this, and there's something you can do with it. So you didn't hit chapter 5 yet, but chapter 5 is the surround ground shield. So you're already ahead of the game. And if you can get him to do that, and if there's little ones, they can do Bubble Guppies, the television cartoon Bubble Guppies, even really young. They can surround themselves in an imaginary bubble. And we use the Wizard of Oz all the time, Glinda the Good Witch. I used that for years with the adults so they could just visualize it if they felt they needed to. But there's many, even bubble gum. Yeah. Blow in a big bubble. You use whatever visuals you can with them. And a tree's easy. Tree's easy to think of, making yourself roots and locking yourself, in tight. And they like to pretend. The shield again, the vest, the shield, the WWE belt, it doesn't matter as long as there's something covering. And I'm very happy that you told me that. So yeah, good for you.
And Pat, I have to say that your surround ground shield, I've talked to so many people. It's like I said, I've given the book away as gifts. I've referred it to people, and I've heard so many people say how that method of surround ground shield is really helpful and has calmed their anxiety. So, that it's a great method. So people, if you don't have Pat's book, check that out and look at that, because and what she just went through on this video, it'll help so many people listening to the replay, because it is a very helpful tool.
That's all we want, right, Ellen?
Yeah.
Share, share, share. Get everybody better all over the world. I keep telling everybody I need a bigger megaphone. And this is another megaphone. It's just another direction to get the word out. And I thank you for having me here.
Yeah.
And,
anybody else have a quick question before we wrap up? Okay. Well, I'm going to
I blabbed plenty.
No, well,
you missed some of it, but you'll have to watch the replay.
So I'm going to thank Pat for coming and talking to us for this hour and sharing her knowledge. This has been so helpful. People who watch on the replay are going to get a lot out of this, and we really, really appreciate it. And you're welcome to come back anytime, Pat, to talk with us some more.
More than happy to. We'll hop topics all over the place.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. And again, if anybody wants to reach out to me, email patlongo1111@gmail.com, and I will direct you in any way that I can.
Yeah. And
Okay.
we have, your book is listed on our website, on the Highly Intuitive Kids website. And then Pat you have your website and YouTube videos. So there's a lot of information out there
Yeah.
that Pat
There's
offers.
a lot of videos. I've put up like 50 of them that are 5 minutes each. So if somebody had a free half an hour, they could look at a bunch of them, and they're questions from all over the world. And I try to get 5 questions in every 5-minute video and answers. So I haven't done them in a while, but there's plenty of information out there. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Was that Pat Longo 1111 at
Yes.
Gmail? Okay.
patlongo1111@gmail.com. That's me. All right. And patlongo.net. I'm not .com, I'm .net. So I will, I'm going to go eat my dinner now.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to
I
stop.
was to wait until we
now.
were done, and now I'm going to go eat because I'm getting hungry.